Okay, this video is intended to walk students through the steps of annotation in preparation of writing a rhetorical précis. What I have here on screen for you is a New York Times columnist, Nicholas Kristof. His article, "If Americans Love Moms, Why Do We Let Them Die?" Came out this past summer in July. And so the first part of this video, I'm just going to kind of walk through the article and annotate as I go. And then what I'll do is I'll pause the screen and open a Word document, and I'll talk about how to take your annotated column and reflect on it and make it into a rhetorical précis. So right here, even in the lead of the story, we see that Nicholas Kristof is going to kind of open up with a qualification. Still not exactly sure what his claim is yet, but he is qualifying this absolute belief that we love mothers, and so that kind of maybe suggests that he's not just going to assume that everyone thinks the same. And so he starts to reveal more of his true purpose here in the second graph, where he starts shifting the focus with some shock value. He takes like a pretty reasonable statement, "We love mothers," at the top, and then pairs it with this kind of shocking twist, "We're lying." And then he starts to kind of get into his main point, where he talks about the topic, which is going to be structured healthcare and motherhood. And I think you'll start to see he does this a lot throughout the piece, but he does a lot of these right here where he mentions things like women are about 5 times as likely to die in pregnancy or childbirth as a British woman. And this is an unattributed statistic. And so that's sounds like a claim of fact, but it's more of a claim of value, because it doesn't have a source of repute with it. Then he even kind of follows it up with another claim of value here, that Great Britain that is, makes a determined effort to save mothers' lives and we don't. And so he's attempting to appeal to our emotion here. Maybe that's outrage, or a protective sense towards mothers. And you'll notice he continues to do the same thing in the second or the third graph here. He gives us another unattributed attempt at a claim of fact. He also includes another personal claim of value here, that the healthcare plans proposed by Republicans is going to make maternal mortality even worse in Texas and across America. And really what this shows here is that he's making an appeal to his own authority. He makes a blanket claim that Republicans and their healthcare plan is going to make things worse, and we're supposed to take his word for it as an expert. So I'm going to scroll down a few paragraphs here to his first kind of source, I guess. Her name is Dr. Lisa Hollier. She's the president-elect of the American Congress for Obstetrics and Gynecologists. And so I would think on this issue of maternity, she would certainly classify herself as an expert, and I think that's reasonable. What's concerning is this aspect right here, where Dr. Hollier is on a mission to make motherhood safer. And so this detail about his source shows observable bias. And so her expert opinion, while certainly expert, should also be considered with a little bit of skepticism because she is biased on the issue. And I'm going to continue down. Dr. Hollier has a few things to say. Most of her input in this opinion piece is through the use of anecdote. And so I think that that's quite obviously going to be an emotional appeal from her personal experience. And again, this is appealing to protection, maybe, or protectiveness towards pregnant mothers or maternity, and so this would certainly qualify as a claim of value as well. And this expert source's testimony doesn't become really damaging rhetorically to Christoph's argument until he starts to kind of apply it with some logical fallacy right here. He suggests that his experience with Dr. Hollier and her stories gives him a very simple and inexpensive starting point. And it's this. He talks about protecting mothers and reducing maternal death rate by helping girls avoid getting pregnant in the first place. And while if there are fewer mothers getting pregnant, then that would quite naturally result in fewer deaths from pregnancy. The idea that the funding for pregnancy prevention programs, as he brings up here, is going to generate this false cause. The idea that funding teenage pregnancy prevention programs would actually improve the chances of a pregnant mother surviving her pregnancy is not a logical cause. And really from here, Christoph continues to use that false cause throughout the piece, mixed in with some other kind of appeals to emotion through anecdote. And really it kind of comes to a point down here. He starts to, in this paragraph here, suggest that declined funding for programs like Planned Parenthood has led to an increase in abortions as well as high death rate from cervical cancer. And there's just no empirical or factual evidence to support that correlation. And so we would again call this a false cause. It's a claim of value, sorry. There we go. And so really going back and looking at his piece, I think we notice that he has primarily used this logical fallacy of false cause. He's used many claims of value through emotional appeals and anecdotes. And he also uses a lot of unattributed statistics to try to make his point. And none of those would really add up to effective persuasive rhetoric per se, and that's something we'll talk about in the Precis. But I did want to point out he does come in and use a new strategy at the bottom. He uses this rhetorical question, but I think honestly this is pretty ineffective at this point because he's already lost his audience, and anything that he does suggest that would score points for his view kind of smacks of too little too late. And so here we are. Now that we've gone through the article and kind of detected some of his rhetorical styles, we're going to come together and kind of summarize it in this rhetorical précis form. So the rhetorical précis is not very long. It's generally really actually heavily formatted, and so taking it one sentence at a time, one step at a time is going to be the effective way to do this. And so what you'll see is that Here we talk about the first sentence, identifying the author, publication, column titles, and date, has some sort of attributing voice verb like says, followed by a that clause that identifies what the columnist says, what their main assertion is. And so I'm going to scroll down real quick and look at the sample about this article and kind of highlight it in the same color. So we've got If Americans Love Moms, Why Did We Let Them Die? From 2017 by Nicholas Kristof. He argues, that would be right here, this is the verb, argues that the structure of healthcare in the United States creates a far more deadly situation for becoming a mother than in other advanced countries. Okay, that captures his major claim. It uses some quotes from the actual piece to support his idea. I did not mention that this came in the New York Times, so that's kind of an oversight on my part, which could go here in the parenthetical citation. It could be New York Times 2017, or I could put New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof here to attribute the source. But basically the first sentence is a summary of the speaker's main point. And so I think what you'll see here is sentence 2, which I'll do in green, is going to explain how the author supports the major claim. In other words, how do they develop it structurally and rhetorically? Explain section by section using chronological order if necessary. And so I think I actually broke mine out into 2 sentences, and that's okay, because I understand if you're trying to say something really complex, sometimes it doesn't fit very well in one sentence. And so I'm going to highlight here as I go. So Kristof dramatizes the shocking claim by giving an alarming yet unattributed statistics. That's the first strategy we saw him use. And then I put an example. A woman in Texas is about 10 times as likely to die from pregnancy as one in Spain or Sweden. Okay. The next strategy that I saw him using for an attempt to persuade his audience was interviewing a figure of authority who had a clear bias on the issue. Dr. Hollier, while no one questions her expertise in the area, he does suggest, or not just suggest, but declare that she's on a mission to make motherhood safer. And that's a pretty clear bias on how she feels on the issue. And then he kind of transitions in the middle and latter parts of his column into these attacks that are structured around logical fallacy, specifically false cause, which is what I'm going to explain in this second sentence of the second part. So I need to identify logical fallacy a little more specifically. So I say that he uses false cause, that the current president slashing $213 million from teen pregnancy prevention programs is somehow related to pregnancy-related death in the United States because you can't die from pregnancy when you're not pregnant. Okay? And so the last 2 sentences, or little sections, if you're doing like more sentences, I'll do this one in blue. This one's going to start looking at the concrete and abstract parts that you would normally look at in rhetorical analysis. Okay, so I'm going to look at author's purpose, the specific message. This is really the abstract task in rhetorical analysis, so let's look at how it looks in the example. I'm talking about his purpose. He's appealing to the natural disgust and revulsion, maybe that sense of protection like we talked about, to a relatively high maternal mortality rate during pregnancy. And his purpose is to persuade public opinion. He wants to change people's minds about funding cuts for organizations like Planned Parenthood. Okay, so I'm talking about what his message is, his main appeal, and I'm also talking about the ultimate goal that he's trying to achieve with that appeal. And then finally, here, sentence 4 is going to do the tone and language analysis. And so, I go quite directly. His tone is dramatic and employs several emotional anecdotes in an attempt to create sympathy and guilt in his audience, yet to a discerning eye, his claims are vague. Then I give an example that he uses about the state of California. His examples are unattributed. Obamacare helped tackle maternal mortality by expanding insurance. That sounds like a claim of fact, but it's really a claim of value, and they're exaggerated with bias. Republican healthcare plans would instead follow the path of Texas, making motherhood more dangerous across America. And that is basically a rhetorical précis. Good luck.